Hello and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. This podcast is brought to you by FinPro Search Partners, the executive search firm for the InsurTech industry on an international basis. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to hear a bit more about our recruitment services, please visit www.wearefinpro.com. I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bonds, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Aurora Voss of Zemble. Hi, how are you?
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, is it what time is it where you are? Are you in New York, I think we were saying?
Yeah, it's such a glorious morning in New York. I'm here. I usually live in Sydney, Australia, but I'm traveling off the back of ITC in Vegas and I've come to spend a week in New York, and it's just beautiful here.
Yeah,
I think if you've been in New York in winter, anything other than that is like, paradise.
Yeah. Well, I was there for ITI earlier in the year, and it was really hot at the time. And I've always been quite lucky with New York, and I think I've only ever been, and everyone tells me about how bleak it can be in the winter, so I just actively avoided it. But no, it's slightly more hospitable weather than Vegas, which was quite a lot to deal with. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it was full on. Although the last time, this is my first time back in the US since 2019. I spent quite a lot of time here then, and the last time I was in New York, I was pregnant, quite heavily pregnant, and a result of that is that I can't go in the subway anymore. I sound so posh, but I'm like, I can't go down there anymore because any slight smell, of which there are many in New York, kind of triggers me, and I think I've yacked on every street corner in the East Village, so it's a new experience.
That's a thing to avoid. That's definitely a thing to avoid. Yeah. Well, we've dived straight in, and I think it's coming back off ITC. We met there, and obviously I understood more about Zemble there. But just for the people who are listening in, who might not know the Zemble business, it'd be wonderful if you could introduce yourself and the business.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. So my name's Aurora Voss. I'm CEO and co-founder at Zemble. And at Zemble, we're building new data and communication pipes for insurance cost centers. So what does that mean? It means that we help our insurance customers of all kinds to create personalized digital experiences for everyone involved in crazy complex processes like claims, complaints, disputes, compliance, and in helping them to kind of configure and better manage their data, we help them to codify decision making in those cost centers, which is very exciting, actually. Funnily enough.
Yeah. Well, when we spoke, and I was talking about this yesterday with some of the ones at an event on claims. I know it's not just claims, but I'm very excited about anything that touches on claims. I've got a bit of a thing.
Yeah, you're my people.
I get far too excited about it. But I think I shared this with you at the time. I think we've talked so much about the customer and delivering for the customer. And there's not been enough done in tech for things like claims, which is actually it's the touch point. It's what you're buying. And we love to talk about claims being the shop window of insurance, but it felt like that shop window has been a bit unloved and abandoned for quite some time.
Yeah, it's funny, when I don't have an insurance background. And when I first started in this company and, started pitching, and back then we were called something different, and the focus was quite a lot more narrow than it is now. And I remember getting up in front of anyone who would listen and being like, claims is the shop window, the shop front, and this is the soul of the whole thing in insurance, and we must improve the customer experience. And you learn a lot over 4 or 5 years, and now the pitch is quite different because now I understand that there's absolutely no way you can deliver a great customer experience in any industry if the kind of bones and the pipes inside the organization aren't, really top quality and working well. And I'm someone who's come from lots of other industries, but always from cost centers. So I've always been, customer experience or, debt collection or, having to kind of deliver on a promise post sales. And we never get the right tech. We never get the good tech. We always get the shit tech. And so, and I mean, claims is just a beautiful example of that. So, I'm an advocate through and through. Love talking claims.
Well, we'll dive into that, and I want to start from the top. So you came to Zemble as an investor, I believe. So what was the sort of, what's the founding story of Zemble? And I know it wasn't Zemble originally, but obviously now it is, but where does it sort of emanate from?
Yeah, so I was not an original co-founder of the business. So there were two original co-founders, Alfonso and Spencer, two Mexican guys, one software developer of many years, having worked across all kinds of industries for companies like Oracle, and Spencer, who was a claims guy. So he had worked in medical and disability type claims, running big teams, carrier TPA, and really, you know, when you talk to most people who work in claims, they're just people. Like, they're just people who are there to help people through really, really hard times. They're not technical people. They're not, you know, process-driven people. They're just there to help. And his experience, as I think lots of claims people will confirm, was that the technology that was there, it just got in the way, you know, in an effort to kind of, you know, digitize or improve processes on the inside. It just got in the way of building relationships with vulnerable customers at their most vulnerable time. And so the founding story of Zemble is really, we were called ClaimSpace back then, is really how can we build technology or deliver technology that doesn't get in the way and helps to strengthen relationships, you know, not just from the claims person to the customer, but all of the other people involved and need to get involved in solving these really complex, sometimes really ugly processes. I came to it as an investor. So I worked in venture capital before this, and the venture capital firm I worked for, H2 Ventures, was the first investor in Zemble. And I always, you know, when I talk to other people who've worked in venture capital, we all agree that you become very obsessed with certain companies in your portfolio. And, you know, I completely fell in love with Alfonso and Spencer from the moment I met them, fell in love with the problem, fell in love with the approach, had myself, despite not being from insurance, had made a disgusting number of claims in my short life. And so had a lot of experience on the customer end, and having come from industries like healthcare, you know, heavily regulated, very messy cost centers, I fell in love. I always say I just immediately fell in love with the problem and the space.
I love that. Nigel Walsh should be enjoying that, because he was on a mission to get people to fall in love with insurance. So he'll be very happy about that. But you know, interesting though to come to insurance and InsurTech, because, you know, as an investor, you get this kind of broad overview of different businesses. You had other businesses in your portfolio, so we kind of now I sort of get the kind of specifically this business maybe, but why insurance and InsurTech from that point of view? What was it about the sector that, you know, particularly, or was it just this company that really sort of pulled you in?
No, I mean, I don't know. I think for me, it was more of the personal connection that I had to the problem at large. You know, I'd come, you know, I was in VC. Before that, I was working at KPMG, and I was working across a few really interesting lines of business. So I was I had InsurTech, sports tech, and ag tech. So I've certainly been exposed to a lot of other opportunities and industries, but I think ultimately it came down to the personal connection I had to the problem. You know, I joke about having made a lot of claims in my life, but I think my first experience of claims was as a sort of young teenager. We're South African, and we immigrated to Australia. My parents worked, like, they lost most of what they had in the move. They worked really hard. They bought us a new family home, and we lost it in a flood not very long after we bought it. And that was traumatic enough. But then the claims process after that was what I remember most, you know, my parents going through that. And I remember just thinking, how is this so terrible? And it sort of marked my early teen years. And then coming back to, you know, being exposed to Zemble, you know, 20 years later, I remember thinking when I first met the guys, I was like, definitely this is better now. I was like, there's no way that people are out there having the same experience that my family had 20 years ago. I was like, nah, that's crazy, especially not in home and auto, which is such a high volume, low margin industry. Like, they must have fixed this. And then it turned out, you know, not that nothing had changed, but that there hasn't been enough movement, because, as it turns out, those pipes inside that kind of basic core is still not agile enough. So I think, ultimately it was about the people, and about that personal problem that I just thought, okay, you have to drop everything at that point and go, well, you got to give it a crack. You got to go and try. So yeah,
it's interesting though, because you think of those other industries, ad tech, sport tech, InsurTech. I think you ask most people on the street, they'd be like, both of those other two sound more fun.
Yeah, way more sexy. And but
then to your point, I think there's bigger inherent problems to solve. Right? I think there's big opportunities in sport tech, ad tech, but you're like, I don't know. I think about advertising all the time, and obviously it's been quite a big thing on social media. And I did a marketing degree, so I kind of looked at the advertising industry and I thought, do I really want to sell things to people that don't want it? Like, is that what I want to do with my life? Is like, and sports tech, and I'm like, I love playing sport, but I don't really like the business around it. And I don't think anybody does. Some of it's good, some it's bad. So I think you made the right moral choice, obviously. But but I would.
Yeah, what's funny about insurance, that from the out, I think people in insurance understand this inherently, but I certainly didn't. Insurance is, light years more exciting than it was 20 years ago. And it's not necessarily because of the technology. I remember 5 years ago when I started on the InsurTech scene, and everyone was talking about, like we've got to turn insurance into Amazon. We've got to have these like Amazon type of customer experiences. And I remember thinking like, well, no, like I don't, there's like a sector of the insurance industry where Amazon type experiences is absolutely the right way to go. Then there's like a whole other relationship based type part of the industry where that's probably not the right approach. But the truth is, insurance is way more interesting and exciting than it used to be, because I think traditionally it was about, we're an insurance carrier and we have our customer, and that's the relationship. And now the truth is, it's not only about technology, but the relationship structures in insurance are so much more exciting than they used to be. Now you've got the realization that as an industry, insurance ecosystems is where we're headed. It takes many to not just lift the tide, but actually to service policy. And so now you've got these incredible structures. You've got MGAs partnering with lots of carriers. You've got data partners. You've got brokers who everyone thought would disappear, but it turns out they're this fundamental core of the industry. So when I think about it from that approach, you're like, wow, there's so not just so much left to do, but it's a much more rich and exciting industry than I think it used to be. And then when you think about the possibility of technology on top of that, you're like, it's especially exciting.
Yeah, I was on this. I was telling you about an ill-fated webinar I was on where my computer kept crashing. But before it crashed, the point we were asked about was like essentially what skills and what's the talent profile of people coming into the industry. And I said it's less about. It's never been that there's not been talented people, and there's never been that there's not been specialists in the industry. And this is ignoring the obvious kind of growth of tech. You've got the same kind of like people that are required to do it. They have to be curious, they have to be interested, but they have to believe. Like, I think you have to believe in that what you're doing is actually providing a safety net and a facilitator. So a safety net for people that need it, and a facilitator for things like business and commerce. And that's the thing that I really buy into. And it's international, and it's kind of, sort of completely agnostic about who you are, what you are, as long as there's a kind of price we can give you that you can afford, you can go for it. But what we talked about was culturally, I think people are coming into it with a slightly different, clearer mindset, and the technology is helping that. So, I was talking to someone yesterday that, just the fact that now when I give you my address, you don't have to ask me how old's my building. You used to get asked, how much would it cost to rebuild your house if it fell over? Why would I know that information? I'm not a builder. Like, you've got my profession, it is recruitment professional. I don't know anything about building. So, now you don't need to do that. Now when I have a claim, the automation part of it, kind of, because all the things people outside of the industry hate about the industry is all the stuff that technology can solve. And then I just, I look forward 20 years for when we're having sort of more positive conversations about your insurance partner being able to proactively do things for you, like, oh, there's a change in your life, would it benefit you to get coverage for that, or this is why this might be the case, and it becomes a helpful part of your life, and it actually becomes what it's truly supposed to be there for, which is, the payments of the many, back up the few, and also it's frictionless. So I don't think anyone dislikes the idea of insurance, but when you have a claims process like you experience like yourself, when you have kind of horrible sign-up process like I'm talking about, these are the things people don't like. It's and it's like saying, it's like going for a meal and saying the meal was great, service was appalling, it was really hard to book in, they wanted to kick me out before I was ready to go. It's not the bit you remember, right? You don't remember the lovely meal you had at dinner. Anyway, I'm preaching to the converted, so I'm going to move on.
No.
So you are obviously based in, the business is remote, but you're based in Sydney, I believe. And so you're a board member of InsurTech Australia. I'm questioning everything that I've put down here because I know we've got one thing wrong, so it makes me nervous. But you are a board member of InsurTech Australia. I wanted to ask you how important those types of groups are in innovation within the industry. What part do they really play in innovation?
Oh, they're the best. I think they're really important. I mean, I know, I'm going to speak to the Australian market, but I think even especially during COVID, they've been so important. Because there is a tendency when you get any kind of, let's call it a legacy or very old industry and new kind of technology to try and help it, there's a tendency to sort of silo and operate in, alone. Because the truth is that any insurance organization that you speak to, and in fact, this is true of any industry, but we all believe that we are unique, and we all believe that we are not special, but we have our own way of doing things. And that can, at an industry level, sort of compound into this very kind of siloed way of thinking. And when you have a whole range of new technologies coming to try and service and improve an industry, I think bodies like InsurTech Australia, and there are many, in the UK, the US, they play a really important role, because ultimately they're about bringing people and organizations and technology together and exposing not just problems that organizations have, but then technologies that may solve them. They're really important for networking, and insurance remains, I think, a relationship-based industry. It's true not just for the customer, but for us operating inside the industry. It's true that trust is king, or queen, and I think organizations like InsurTech Australia facilitate so many relationships, connections, and expose a lot of tech that may go unnoticed otherwise. So it's been such a good experience for me, and and I'm actually stepping off the board this November, but the experience has been phenomenal. No, I really believe in those groups, and I think there's I think exactly the same as you, and the important part they play, and just the connecting the dots. I mean, I was speaking to someone in InsurTech UK, and they were saying, for example, just from my perspective, selfishly from my business, and they went, "Oh, you've done a good job for some of us. Do you want us to connect you to InsurTech Australia?" or and just making that introduction, and that just in itself is helpful. Not for me, but I'd like to think for clients and potential clients that we might have, because you go, well, where do you find someone who knows anything? For example, if you wanted to branch out into the UK, there's a guy over here and that can help you out. And I think just that flow of information, we can sometimes underplay how important that can be. So I think they're important. And actually yesterday, that makes me think, for an Australian, I'm an Australian founder. Zemble is now a kind of US entity. We've flipped up because we have investors here. But as an Australian founder coming to a place like New York, it can be absolutely overwhelming. And yesterday I had a call with the lovely Tony Liu from InsurTech New York. And, just in one conversation, he made so many introductions for me, helped me sort of think about approaches to this market differently. So hats off to everyone running those type of groups.
Yeah, awesome. I wanted to ask you how that serving on the board, being part of that kind of community, you see this industry-wide view. Has it influenced at all your role as CEO, or how you conduct yourself in that role as CEO?
Oh yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. I've never been a CEO before, and I've never run a company before. This is my first rodeo, and I know that. I've got investors and we've got obviously governance and things in our own company, but I know that, since joining InsurTech Australia, there've been two CEOs. So first Reedy Yates, amazing, and now Simone Dossiter. And I've learned a lot from those two women, just in how professional they are, how well they run, and a lot of what I learned being on that board, I take back to my own company, and I think they've definitely made me a better CEO for sure. Yeah, I think so.
I think it's particularly, I mean, it's true myself, right? This is my company, but I've never really run a company before, certainly not my own. I've been a co-founder, and, you know, I had a really experienced co-founder, so I kind of leaned into that person and running this thing. I just joined a network of people in the recruitment profession, and you don't know what you don't know as well. That's the thing. And you just sometimes see something and go, I think I really should know that. I don't.
Totally. And it's absolutely true. I think that my proximity to InsurTech Australia has been a huge bonus for Zemble, because I mean, there's always a risk of building something in isolation, particularly as, you know, a new tech product wanting to change the world. And you know, at Zemble, first and foremost, we have our customers and prospects who, you know, every day they're teaching us about what is important and what is needed. But having that kind of bird's eye view and access to all kinds of parts of the industry, that's really influenced Zemble, particularly from a product perspective. It's given us a lot more context that we otherwise wouldn't have had access to. So
yeah, super helpful. Wanted to take you back in time a little bit to maybe a slightly traumatic experience, so hopefully not. But you raised your seed round in 2020. What was that experience like? Any surprises? Was it as you expected?
No, it wasn't as I expected. Yeah, so look, I have this background in VC, and before that, you know, accelerators, and before that I had worked for startups, and, you know, while I was working there, they had gone through capital raises, and, you know, I'd had to contribute to that. So what the funny thing is, I'd had a lot of experience, particularly in my time in VC was for sort of very, very early stage. And so I think that I went into it thinking that I knew more than I did, probably. And I remember when I was in VC telling, you know, the portfolio companies, you know, remember this and don't do this and make sure you watch out for that. And then, of course, I walked right into my own business and made all of the same mistakes. But that first round that we raised was a very intense experience. And I also, you know, I should mention that I joined Zemble as a co-founder, I think in, let's say, February of 2019. And about a month later, I got pregnant for the first time, very unexpectedly, because we'd been trying for a very long time before that. So I was heavily pregnant when I was raising my first round of capital. And I was, you know, I had trouble raising in Australia. I mean, obviously it's a much smaller market, probably more conservative investor profile. And also, you know, we were very, very early on and didn't have very much traction. So I was just traipsing across the US. I mean, I was on a plane, you know, 2 or 3 times a week through different programs, going out and pitching to investors all over the US while I was, you know, about 6 or 7 months pregnant. So yeah, it was a very challenging time. And I didn't actually manage to close out that first round of capital until after I had gone back to Australia, had the kid. And by that time, it was the middle of the pandemic. So I actually ended up sort of raising the end of the round, you know, in those first early stages of the pandemic, which was crazy. And yeah, it sort of all came together in the end. We found phenomenal lead investors here in New York. And then, you know, people asked me, and I actually ended up raising the rest of the round over Twitter. So I remember sitting in my bedroom with the newborn, breastfeeding the newborn baby at like 3 o'clock in the morning, getting on Twitter and connecting with, you know, a couple of founders of businesses I really respect in San Francisco. And, you know, they said, oh, what are you building? And I'm building this. And are you raising? Yes, I am. And, you know, we sort of ended up closing the round that way, which was just wild. You know, no one before 2020, you know, January or March of 2020 would have thought that you could raise a round of capital remotely, you know, and lucky for me, it turned out to be the way to go. And so, yeah, it was a great experience. And I think, you know, they say, I don't know, like childbirth, the first one's the hardest. So, you know, we will probably look to raise another round of capital next year. And I'm really excited to, because I think, you know, having done one and having raised through a pandemic and having raised, you know, when I like recently born baby, I think maybe I'll have a clearer head this time around.
Yeah. You're not going to try and coincide and getting pregnant just to make it doubly hard the second time around.
No. I've done 2 babies, and now we can move on.
Because what would you take from that experience in terms of how you prepare for the next fundraise? Would you go back to your learnings and go, right, you knew all these things, you still did them anyway? Is this something that you took from that? Hit Twitter up harder? I don't know. What would the
No, I mean, I think that ultimately, like, the lessons that I learned when I was in VC and I used to tell the portfolio companies remains the same. I think when you're in a growing startup, particularly around sort of the early stages, before you hit sort of like Series A, B, C, where things are sort of more structured and I suppose clear. I think the key is always going to be consistency. And I mean, that's kind of a life motto anyway, in relationships that you have. But I think if you can, I've learned to be consistent in investor updates, consistent in documenting our traction, consistent in, growing relationships with investors, sometimes years in advance of ever asking them for money. And I think definitely, just personally, the last 2 years has been very intense for me because I've been, getting the business off the ground, but also had 2 children during a pandemic. And it's really come to bear that if you have a really rock solid relationship with your investors, I mean, it's just such a huge advantage. And they've definitely seen me through some challenging times. But yeah, I think consistency and investing in those kind of relationships is really important. And I mean, I have a clear idea in my head of what our next round looks like, and I have a clear idea of who I'd like to raise money from, and I know those people already. I've been building relationships with them for 2 years and keeping them updated with our progress, and that's, I think that's really what's turned out to be the most important thing.
I think that's really a good point to make that I think sometimes people miss, and certainly something I misjudged when I didn't realize how much of a relationship driven business like investment VC world was. I think it's interesting for new founders that's raising for the first time. And definitely I sort of have conversations where I think people go, oh, you just think it's a check. And I don't think like blindly they think, oh, I want this investor versus that investor, but sometimes they want a marquee investor because they want that marquee investor. And you go, and the more and more close you get, you need that close relationship. It needs to, and it needs to be a good relationship, because otherwise you must be so much more stressful running a, venture-backed business with a bad relationship with your investors, or not even not a good one. Like it just must be so much.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I always say that like the best boss or bosses I've ever had were my bosses back at H2 Ventures, which was the VC I was working for before Zemble, that invested in Zemble. And I mean, I'm so grateful for them, because they're 2 brothers, Ben and Toby Heap, that run H2, and they're the partners there. And I mean, they set the benchmark for me for what a relationship with an investor should be like. And I model everything moving forward. I model on that. And that's proven right. And I mean, the relationship thing is true with the sales side of my business as well. I mean, it's very easy to kind of go into an insurance organization, especially a claims organization, and be like, oh, like, this is terrible. Like, the way you're doing things is terrible, and you really need to digitize everything. And then you realize, it's actually about relationships. I've been there's some customers that we have. I was talking to them for 2 years before they ended up coming onto the Zemble platform. And, by building those relationships, I understood, they had goals, but not everything is possible immediately. Particularly the kinds of people that we work with, they're the heads of cost centers. And you can't always, as an insurance cost center, just say, hey, like, give me money for this project right now. Obviously there's a process. So yeah, there's a lot of parallels and crossovers, but yeah, relationships are everything.
Yeah, that sales thing's really the really interesting point, because I think some of the things that people get wrong when selling, from my point of view, is that they're, it's like the insinuation, oh, you should, our technology is better, so therefore you should do it. You're like, the people that are running these cost centers are pretty smart. They know what's wrong. Like, they know what's wrong. They're like, yeah, we'd love to do that. We just can't do it right now because timescale, budget, manpower, like there's a myriad of reasons to come with the assumption almost like, well, don't you know your technology is rubbish? You're like, yes, we do. Because we're dealing with it every day. So there's a level of empathy in that, isn't there, as well? And there's sort of respect for the person on the other side of it. You know.
Totally. And it's funny, you know, we at Zemble, I mean, our customers are varied in size, but I'd say the kind of bread and butter, the bulk of our customer base, they're not huge insurance organizations. They're small to mid-market, like carriers, TPAs, MGAs, sometimes smaller reinsurers. And, you know, when you talk to their head of claims, you know, it's a mistake to go in and say, oh, you know, you've got a crap claims organization because, you know, you don't have a digital platform that you haven't created these seamless digital experiences for customers. Because if you talk to the head of claims in one of those smaller organizations, they're like, well, actually, my differentiator is that I'm willing to pick up the phone and call a customer when, you know, there's been a disability loss or, you know, a complex commercial claim, and there's like, that's my advantage. And it's absolutely true that smaller organizations in claims complaints, that is their advantage. And so if you go in and you're like, you know, what you're doing sucks, you know, it shows that you don't really understand what they're aiming for. And that's true of Zemble. You know, I've certainly evolved to learn, you know, underneath it all, or every organization, every claims organization, if you talk to them, they say, oh, our goal is to deliver great experiences for our customers and our partners. And sometimes that means, yes, we need to digitize everything and have like a 24/7 online. But sometimes it actually means, you know what, I don't know where my data is. And I've got these 3 reinsurance or carrier partners, and it's really hard sharing data between the 2 organizations. And actually, if I fix that and make that way more efficient, then it's going to free me up to invest in the time I spend with my customer over the phone, understanding where they're at, you know. So yeah, every organization is different, and sometimes what we think of as, you know, like sexy tech, you know, is actually not a priority for customers right now.
There might be a reason it doesn't have that. I mean, I think about, you know, if I think of like real, you know, we're a sort of search firm, but we skirt the line and we work with smaller companies, so we work a bit sort of nimbler, so we embrace quite a lot of technology. But yeah, some of the people that I really respect in my industry that do some of the most senior searches in insurance, they almost like, you know, they don't have LinkedIn licenses, and they're not interested in having like technology that helps them out, because it's all relationship driven business. But it would be foolish of me to say that, you know, they can get anyone anywhere, but they do it by picking up the phone and speaking to people and building relationships. So yeah, it even reflects in my industry. I wanted to talk to you about communication, actually, sort of moving on from there. So you've got team members in 6 different countries, I think.
It's constantly changing. Some of our team members are sort of starting kind of nomadic lifestyles. You know, they're sort of spending some time in different places.
I keep threatening to do that.
Yeah.
I threatened the team, can we go to Argentina for a month, because it's on a really good timeline. And currently, as we sit here with the British economy tanking, I'm thinking, well, I might as well. Before my pounds are absolutely useless, I might as well take them somewhere. But how does that impact your ability to deliver your products and services in different countries? Because I know the positives of it, and the remote setup, and you can hire anyone anywhere, you can allow people to be nomadic, but does it impact your kind of ability to deliver at times? And so I suppose follow up from that is like, how do you counteract that, or how do you overcome that, if it's a problem at all?
Yeah, so in terms of delivery, I mean, we've got customers effectively in like 2 time zones, right? In the sort of Australian time zone and in the US time zone. So at the beginning, it was really hard, because especially during the pandemic, like me, my co-founder, and our whole team was in Australia. We had customers in Canada and some, you know, early on trying to sell to the US, and that was hard. I mean, the reality was that I was, you know, having phone calls at sometimes 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, that was really difficult. And so actually having a more remote global team, our first step was we need support centers in both time zones. And it's been phenomenal. I think business-wise, that was the most important fundamental to get right. So are our customers supported around the clock for whatever happens? Because we are we're a business critical system, and that comes with a lot of responsibility in terms of not really just downtime, but just the ability to actually have someone pick up the phone. There was an example there was an internet outage in Canada a couple of months ago, and our platform wasn't affected, but the people, our customers in Canada, needed to be able to pick up the phone and speak to someone from Zemble. So in that sense, having a kind of global remote business has been phenomenal for us and for the customers. And we'll just continue to invest in people in both time zones. And it's no longer like a country specific thing. It's just as long as someone is roughly in the Latin American, US, Canadian time zone, as long as someone's roughly in Australia, it's great. Of course, it has other challenges from a sort of business organizational perspective. You have to rethink, we went from all in person to remote very, very quickly. It was a sharp shift, but you also adjust and adapt, and we've just become, you have less meetings for sure, which is actually really nice. But you adapt, and I think particularly for a company at our early stage, we're adapting all the time. Like probably every 6 months, we have a kind of organizational shift in how we run things, because the business requires new things. We're at a different stage, so if you can be agile, then and you can sort of think on your feet, then it really works. And it's a tremendous and incredibly rich experience having team members from different backgrounds with different languages, in different time zones, celebrating different things. It's a beautiful thing. And my co-founder I'm originally South African, but my co-founder is from Mexico, and so just that in itself, we have different backgrounds, so we embrace that.
Yeah, no, I love that. Although it make me laugh about languages, because I've now got a team that all speak French other than me. So
No way.
I've actually banned them from speaking French apart from on Friday, because I'm like, I can tolerate not being able to understand anything you're saying about me for one day.
That's really funny. Spanish is the unofficial language at Zemble. I'm just really lucky. I'm married a Mexican as well, so I'm lucky that I can speak Spanish fluently. But it's true, it's actually really nice. New team members who join us, they all give it a go, and everyone sort of ends up doing Spanish classes.
Yeah, I can understand Spanish. That's the irony. I'd be all right at Zemble. I'm terrible at languages. I just lastly, I'm really conscious of time, so I'll probably make this the last thing we ask you. But we talked about it earlier. It wasn't originally Zemble, was it? The business was Claims something. Sorry,
Claim Space. Yeah,
Claim Space. Sorry, I forgot. I wanted to ask you, so it was a rebrand. It's a new name. How do you make these things meaningful, or why was it meaningful to do it? I'm always kind of interested in, because sometimes it's just a rebrand, and it you sort of go, what's the substance behind that? But what was the kind of driver for that, and how do you make it actually mean something to people?
Yeah. It was a whole experience. I think we were really weary, because we got to the point where we thought, okay, it's the right time to rebrand. There was a lot of reasons for that I'll come to, but I think one of the challenges was, we still aren't like a huge kind of scale up, incredibly successful business. That's, we're an early stage technology company, and one of the worst things that you can do at an early stage is lose focus. And if you let it, something as sort of significant as a rebrand can kind of suck up months of your time, or kind of veer you away from what's most important, which is customers and your technology. So we were certainly aware of that. We decided to rebrand for a number of reasons. A lot of it had to do with our own customers. If you go and you search for claims related tools, I mean, it's absolutely crowded, and there's probably 50 companies at this point with claim something or something claim. So certainly we thought about, getting lost in the noise, which was a big driver for the rebrand. But also it was because we were just seeing how the technology was being adopted within these organizations, and it always started with claims, but it turned out not being about claims. When we started, we thought, that naivety that I have, which was, this is definitely already solved for. And when we first started, we thought, oh, all kinds of claims are probably all good and digitized and beautiful. It's probably just these really chunky disability claims that are hard. But then it turned out that actually underneath it all, the real problem was how are insurance cost centers being supported with flexible technology that allows them to become real sort of data warehouse powerhouses and therefore enable great experiences for everyone involved. And so that we thought about that a lot in the change to the name Zemble. Zemble was a kind of a play on the word assemble. You know, my co-founder Alfonso, he's a huge superhero Marvel kind of comic book fan, and he loved the idea of like assemble the team, you know, like assemble the data together. So yeah, internally there was a lot of that going on, and we got input from the team, of course, but also from our customers. You know, we did a lot of sort of understanding and research around what does this platform actually mean to you, and at the end of the day, it had very little to do with claims. It was about, you know, this platform enables us to bring together all of the people that matter to our business and create great experiences for all of them. Why? Because we know where the data is. We've got these clean pipes that we can send it and retrieve it from. So yeah, it was a big undertaking, but we got it. And shout out to Felix, who's our head of product. He came up with the logo, and Jana, who worked with us previously, she helped us with the name. So yeah, lots team effort.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the thing that you touched on there that resonates with me is it's a bit like when people produce values and our values are this as a business, or this is our mission, and we talk about it quite a lot, particularly from a recruitment standpoint. I'm just like, if you're not involving the team, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to hear that the rebrand as well is involving the team, because like everyone has to get behind it and believe in it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we're still a pretty small team. We're like only about 6 people, and so it would be kind of weird if you like left out everyone in such a small team. So yeah, that's how we operate. We managed to view offices, and we just took everyone around all the offices all day because there's not enough of us to worry about. But didn't want any dissenting voices. Well, Aurora, thank you so much. It's been I had such a good time talking to you in ITC. I was like, we've got to get you on. I'm excited about anything related to sort of improving the plumbing of insurance companies, but particularly when it touches on claims. So I always like to finish with like, what's ahead for you? Like, so is there anything coming up that you're really excited about, new territories or funding rounds or any painful things like that? Yeah, look, I mean, we're just in a space where we're just all about customers and trying to get the technology into the hands of as many claims and complaints teams as we can. We certainly, now that travel has opened up, I'm back in the US a lot more. So I've now got my next 3 or 4. I'm sort of out here in the US every 3 months now. So we're just really excited to pick up more conversations in the US market, because at the moment we're sort of we've got our base in Australia and Canada. So yeah, my big focus is on, I suppose, the US market. It's on finding small to mid-sized sort of specialty insurance cost centers. In the US, it's beautiful. There are just so many organizations. We have a big focus on mutual insurers. I think we were saying at ITC, like, one thing that surprised me at ITC was I can't believe how many new insurance companies there are, like how many new MGAs selling new specialized products. So for us, it's just all about more customers, deploying more of the technology, seeing more, beautiful, clean, configurable pipes being put into these cost centers. It's so exciting. So yeah, that's where we're at. We'll certainly look to raise another round of capital next year, but for the next kind of 6 months, it's just all about customers, as it should be.
Brilliant. Well, lovely. That's a lovely tagline to end up. So that'll be a great edit for Sophie. So we'll leave that in there.
Thanks, Sophie.
Aurora, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You too.
So, and really lovely to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. As ever, this is brought to you by FinPro Search Partners, the executive search firm for the InsurTech industry on an international basis. If you want to find out more about what we do from a recruitment standpoint, please visit www.wearefinpro.com.